Hello, everybody. As Tim says, I'm Sam Sinclair. I'm a director at Biodiversify. We're a consultancy that helps people deal with messy and difficult problems related to biodiversity and natural capital. And one of our areas of particular interest is developing landscape level natural capital plans. So I think one of the core premises of why you would develop a plan at a landscape level is that nature is connected and we need to approach it holistically. If we have one project looking at bees, another looking at planting trees, another looking at natural flood protection, and they're all operating their own silos, they're going to miss a lot of tricks in terms of working together to deliver better outcomes more effectively and more cost efficiently. So for me, one of the key roles of developing a landscape level plan is to bring all these different parts together so that we can work together and therefore be more effective. Now, one of the other interesting things about developing a landscape level or regional plan is they have to speak to two different kind of directions. They've got to speak upwards to policy. So from DEFRA's perspective, they've got to be able to see how their policy objectives will be delivered. How is this area going to deliver under the goals of the 25-year environment plan or the water framework directive or sustainable development goals? Equally, however, at the end of the day, someone's actually got to do the work. Someone's going to actually have to go out on their fields and get their boots muddy and change their management practices and make a difference. And the plans have got to speak to them as well. They've got to be, it's going to be very easily and rapidly clear what they mean and how they translate into something tangible. Another difficult balance that these plans have to walk is being both democratic and informed by science. And if you go away and develop a plan in an ivory tower and you don't let anyone see it, then when you put it out, then no one's going to care about it. People have got to be able to have their say, they've got to be able to critique it and have their input. But then equally, you've got to make sure there's a really strong scientific underpinning. Otherwise, you're at real risk of developing a plan that doesn't deliver what it says it does or what its objectives are. So fortunately, a lot of people have had this problem before. This is a ubiquitous problem. Everyone around the world is making challenging trade-off decisions about what to do with their land. So what can we learn from experiences of others? So for me, the real big one is systematic conservation planning. So this is the international best practice in terms of dealing with difficult spatial environmental problems. And this emerged in Australia in the late 80s as a way of figuring out how to expand their protected area network. So a pretty simple original problem. They had a pile of money. They wanted to buy some land, expand their protected area, and they wanted to figure out how could they get the most biodiversity for their buck. All these different species, different ecosystems, where should they spend their money to get the most cost-efficient gains? And it's now, since then, over the last 30 odd years, been expanded to a huge host of other problems. There are multiple competing softwares for doing the analysis. Mark10 is the biggest. It's been used in probably about a third of the countries of the world, if not more, for a huge range of purposes, from EIA to planning mining, to restoration, to water management, river management. Great Barrier Reef zoning plan was done using this approach. And there's a huge body of science. There's probably about 20,000 odd papers written about this. And there's maybe 6,000 to 10,000 plans at a best guess, but even then it's pretty tricky to actually know the full amount. Now, what this approach does is it optimizes the benefits of natural capital actions against implementation costs. So phrased slightly more simply, essentially, how do you get the most natural capital benefit for the lowest cost? And what we've learned, this is probably the single most important lesson from practice, is this is one part analysis and one part social process. You've got to have the both, and you've got to have them twinned well. Like I said, if you go off and develop some complicated black box model that spits out an answer, no one's going to really care what it spits out. You need to have people involved in it and really shaping the process. And it's got to have really robust science, and that's underpinning it. That's completely key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly talk you through an abridged version of the process to give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. So the first thing you do is you identify your stakeholders, and this needs to be as inclusive as possible. You need to bring everybody in. The last thing you want is to develop a plan and then get right near the end and realize there's a key stakeholder who's going to be really annoyed they weren't involved in this, or they might not like the plan and oppose it. Bring them in, have those debates, make it inclusive. And one of the key things here is bringing in both the people who deliver the services, the land managers, the farmers, but also the people who are going to be paying for services. You know, so this could be DEFRA, Elms, or it could be water companies, or Marks and Spencers, or Nestle, or whoever. The next thing you do is you communally identify the goals. And again, this is about shared ownership. Everyone needs to be able to input the goals that they want from their landscape. So to give you an example, I was at a meeting shortly before all this exciting chaos with the virus, and there was someone from a water company and a farmer, and the guy from the water company said, well, I want to clean up the rivers. I want to have cleaner rivers so that I can spend less money and spend less resources in purifying it for reuse. And the farmer went, yeah, that's great. I agree with that. But what I'd also like is there to be trout back in the rivers that go through my land, because I've read the records from previous generations, and there used to be trout there, and there could be again. And I think that's really important. And I love that, because that's a perfect example. They're both equally valid goals. Let's bring them all in. Let's develop a landscape, a vision for everybody. And it's also really clear, important to involve policy here. Many ways you can include those in here. So the next thing you do is you gather your natural capital data. So this is land use data, this is biodiversity data, species, habitats, water quality. Essentially everything you need to represent these goals, both where they exist and where they could exist. Then you gather your cost data. Now this is really key, because this is essentially where your land managers get to have their say. This is where your farmers get to have their input. And this is the cost of the different actions. So if you're planning on reducing, cleaning up the rivers, reducing pollutants in the rivers, you might be asking farmers to reduce the amount of chemicals they use, pesticides, fertilizers, etc. Now, obviously, that incurs a cost. So you can use yield data to start to predict what those costs might be if you're expecting 5-10% reduction in yield. But the trick here is not just having a simple data layer. You also want people's input. So you can use something like the land app, for example, to allow people to draw polygons of their land and provide other bits of local information. So, a farmer might say, look, I appreciate these technically all my fields have the same yield, but this particular one is really important to me for specific logistical reasons. So actually for me, the cost would be higher on that field than it would in others. Great, go on, draw a polygon, send it in, let's put it into the analysis. Because the key here is that people should get to understand this data. They should get to understand its strengths and weaknesses, and it shouldn't be a black box. It should be clear. The next thing you do is you run your analysis. So essentially what this does is it figures out how to achieve your goals, that's the stuff in the green box, as defined by your natural capital data in the blue box, at the lowest possible cost, as defined by the cost data. Essentially, how do you get what you want in the cheapest possible way? And a lot of what it will do to achieve that is to seek synergies. If you're planting trees in the area to improve carbon storage, well, obviously that's going to have some synergies with flood prevention. Once you've done that, it'll spit out something that looks a bit like this, which is a map which highlights areas for natural capital action. So these are areas where if you undertake natural capital action, you will most optimally achieve your goals. I think it's really key is this is just the start of the discussion. Now you need to have a lot of back and forth, the dialogue about what this means, what the strengths and weaknesses are. So you send this out to everybody, people can give their input, they can critique, they can provide more data. Someone might go, well, actually, you said the forest starts here, but it's actually 20 meters back. Great. Go out, use the land app, take a ping, tell us where it is. And you use this to inform a dialogue, and it will hone you in on the difficult discussions you need to make about where compromises are going to happen, how the trade-offs are going to happen. So that's an outline of the process. But what's really key as well is this can link regional level to local level plans. The regional level ones will provide a landscape level vision that links directly to policy. How are you going to achieve the 25-year plan for the environment or sustainable development goals? And it represents the optimal strategy, but it's not binding. If there are changing circumstances, then you can go back and revisit this. It also, as I said, maximizes synergies. How can you work together to achieve multiple goals simultaneously? So if you're a water company looking to invest in some flood defenses or pollutant reduction, well, how can you also deliver on other goals? How can you deliver on local access to green space? This can then link to your local plans. So local level plans, in my mind, these need to be as bottom up as possible. These can be developed by anyone or any group of people who feel that they have the wherewithal and desire to do this. This could be a farmer cluster. This could be a catchment partnership. This could be a group of landowners or a single estate if it's large enough. And the key here is you develop a really practical plan for how you're going to deliver to this regional level vision. So, for example, in this little square here, this little picture, you can see there's a green sway through the middle. Well, that might be a potential wildlife corridor. So the landowners and managers and farmers might get together and talk about how to actually do that. And this is where they can really use their local knowledge. They'll know which hedgerows are the most suitable, where the animals actually go, where's most functional, where floods, where it doesn't. They'll have some really good insights into this. And they can use the regional level plan to inform what they do here. If this area has been highlighted as important for water quality, well, great, they can include a bit of that. Carbon, great, they can include some of that as well. And what this will do is explain how they will deliver their piece of the landscape, their piece of the regional pie, as it were, which means they'll end up with a local plan that is robust, that is built on local knowledge, that is built from the grass up, and makes a really strong business case, because suddenly it's now communicated in policy terms, in the terms of those who might purchase services, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of all kinds of things, which makes a really robust argument. So one of the other things that's important to bear in mind is these plans will mean different things to different people. They'll all be looking at the same map, but it'll mean different things. So if you're a local environmental NGO, or not even a local one, an international one, you might look at this, and this might be a map of opportunity for you. You might go, great, well, I can spend my resources in these green zones to do different things, whether that's harnessing the power of volunteers, whether that's getting kids out, whether that's spending resources. These are your areas in which you should focus your efforts. If you're a private company, if you're looking to make your supply chain resilient, obviously a lot of us are thinking right now about how to make supply chains resilient, about food security. Well, a key output of these regional plans will be how to make your landscapes more climate resilient, how to protect against the droughts and floods that will be coming. Great. Here are your prime spots for investing in order to protect yourself and your business in the future. If you're the farmer, the land manager, here is a way of understanding how you fit into a larger vision. You're not just, on your own doing your stuff on your land. You're actually part of a greater thing, a bigger collective effort, which I think is really important. If you're a builder, we're building a lot of homes at the moment. I live in Cambridge. There's a lot of homes going up around me. You might use a map like this to figure out where you should avoid. If you know if you go into these green spots with high natural capital potential, that might be difficult, that might be challenging. Or conversely, if you have to offset some biodiversity impacts, these green spots highlight where you might most optimally achieve them, and also deliver a host of other benefits at the same time, which means you can not only talk about the biodiversity you've offset, but also the carbon benefits and the resilience and all this kind of stuff. So, like I said, this approach has been applied thousands of times, and there are a lot of experiences and lessons that come up repeatedly, and they've all been learned painfully, and they've all been learned again and again by different people in different places. So the first one is that this is not an exact science. This is a dialogue. This is a discussion. And this is about bringing people together to understand what they need to do in their landscapes, to develop a shared vision. And dialogues and conversations can be difficult. So the software tools here, specially designed to incorporate different forms of information, different forms of feedback, and mediate these dialogues, mediate these conversations to help bring people to a shared vision, a shared compromise that is acceptable. Another key lesson is that the strength of these plans is the shared vision. Once you've done this, once you've gone through this process, that's often very powerful. you may have brought people together around a table who don't necessarily see eye to eye in the environment. And the process of them working through what to do on their landscapes together can be an incredibly powerful one for establishing a strong foundation for future effort. Generally, where these plans have been developed, it's been rapidly uptaken and applied for multiple different purposes very, very quickly, many of which are completely unexpected. And then finally, if we're going to make these plans effective, we need to understand they mean different things to different people. We need to understand that they will need to communicate to a minister or to a government department how their targets are going to be met, how their objectives are going to be reached. But then also someone on the ground has to be able to pick this up and go, cool, I get what this means on my farm. They need to be able to access it to the land app and apply it very directly to their day-to-day action. And if we do that, then we'll be able to have a shared vision for our landscapes, which we can make a strong business case for, fund, apply, and make very real. Thank you very much for listening.